Hi, Vencore Weather meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Friday, November 11th. A lot to talk about today. Quite an interesting weather pattern shaping up for the next week to 10 days or so, not only here in the eastern part of the U.S., but also in the northern Pacific Ocean. We'll focus in on that at the outset here today. In the immediate future, we have colder air pouring into the mid-Atlantic region today. It'll ride in on stiff northwest winds. Can be a few showers associated with this push of colder air during the late morning, early afternoon hours up and down the I-95 corridor. Tonight, temperature could drop to or below freezing in many of the suburban locations along the I-95 corridor. Perhaps the first hard freeze of the season in many suburban locations north and west of the big cities. It stays pretty chilly right through the upcoming weekend, and a reinforcing shot of cool air arrives on Sunday, stays cool on Monday, but then gets fairly mild on Tuesday, perhaps 60 degrees plus up and down the I-95 corridor for afternoon highs, and then a major cold shot arrives on Wednesday. Well, let's first start off by looking at the northern Pacific. There is a monster storm in the making. It's kind of on the western edge of this latest infrared satellite image. This is the storm. It's actually the remains of what once was a strong typhoon called Nuri, N-U-R-I. It is now an extratropical system, intensifying rapidly today. This is the western coast of Alaska, right in this region right here, the Bering Strait right here. This will become a superstorm over the next 12 hours as it heads toward the Bering Strait, perhaps bottom out in terms of atmospheric pressure down around 925 or 930. If it does indeed do that over the next 12 hours or so, by later on tonight, early tomorrow, it'll become one of the strongest storms ever in this part of the world. And it does have ramifications on our weather here in the Mid-Atlantic region. Ultimately, it'll pump up a very strong ridge out ahead of it across the west coast of North America, and then that'll lead to the translation of a deep trough in the central and eastern part of the U.S. in coming days. And indeed, we'll have an Arctic outbreak, perhaps of record proportion in some parts of the country. We're reaching the middle part of the U.S. first around Tuesday or so of next week, and then all the way to the East Coast by about Wednesday of next week. And there's even a threat for a storm to develop in the along the Mid-Atlantic coastline later next week, and it could be cold enough for the first threat for some snow in the Mid-Atlantic region. That is yet to be determined. The cold air is definite. There'll be an Arctic plunge in the middle part of the country by Tuesday of next week, and that cold plunge reaches the East Coast. It spreads out to the East Coast by the middle part of next week. Well, let's take a look at the GFS forecast map for the Pacific Ocean. We don't often look at this viewpoint using the GFS model, but this is actually the current condition out over the Pacific Ocean. First of all, let's get our bearings straight here. This is the west coast of Alaska, right in this region right here, the Bering Strait, the area between Alaska and Russia right here. Here is the storm of interest. This is the remains of what once was Typhoon Nuri. It has lost its tropical characteristics, is becoming an extratropical storm, and will undergo incredible intensification over the next 12 hours or so. Meteorologists like to use the term bombing out, or a meteorological bomb, and that basically refers to storms that can drop some 20-25 millibars in 12 hours, and this clearly will meet those requirements to be called a bomb, a meteorological bomb here by later on tonight into the early part of tomorrow. In fact, let's take a look at the 12-hour forecast from the GFS. Well, here it is, the forecast map for this evening. This is Friday evening. And this storm, by this time, according to the GFS, drops down to, it's even hard to read it on here, it looks like around 928 millibars. Again, that puts it in the ballpark of being one of the strongest storms ever in this region. It'll continue to move towards the Bering Strait, have wind gusts of perhaps up to 80 miles per hour or so, all the way through the Bering Strait, some of the Aleutian Islands, and the west coast, the western part of Alaska. Wave heights could jump to 50 feet or so in this part of the world. And ultimately what this does, it pumps up a huge upper level ridge in this region right here over the next few days along the west coast of North America. And that ultimately results in a deep trough moving into the central and ultimately the eastern part of the U.S. towards the latter part of next week. So certainly some teleconnections going on here where what happens in one part of the world has a ultimate impact on another part of the world, and that's why we want to pay particular attention to this monster storm headed for the western part of Alaska, the Bering Strait, the Aleutian Islands, because it does have an impact on our weather later next week. Well, exactly what kind of an impact might this storm have on the United States, the continental United States? This is the upper level forecast map from last night's Zero-Z GFS model run for Thursday evening. Next Thursday, we're jumping way ahead here, but we talked about a big ridge developing, the pumping up of a big ridge, and sure enough, look at this ridge right here along the west coast. Again, this is a 500 millibar level, perhaps 18,000 feet or so, and upper level low here in the northern part of Canada, the combination of the two, basically an upper level high here along the west coast, and here's the west coast of the U.S. And look at the trajectory of this air mass flooding into the northern part of the U.S. by this time frame, right out of the North Pole, screaming northerly winds here, out of the North Pole region, right into the northern part of the U.S., and that reaches this part of the U.S. around Tuesday of next week, and it spills out over towards the East Coast by about Wednesday or so of next week. Now notice this trough right here, quite an impressive trough that will actually amplify at this time frame late next week, later Thursday into the day on Friday of next week. We still have a lot of energy coming around this newly developed upper level ridge along the west coast. So this bears watching here. What this can result in is the possibility of a storm to form later next week along the mid-Atlantic coastline, perhaps in this region right here, as this trough continues to perhaps deepen during the latter part of next week. And with that cold air coming into place, a storm that does form along the mid-Atlantic coastline late next week could actually present the first threat for snow in parts of the mid-Atlantic region towards the end of next week. The cold air is definite. That's coming. It arrives in the middle part of the country first and then spreads to the east. This potential storm is not definite, but it is something we'll monitor over the next several days. And all of this, partially the result of this monster storm headed for the Bering Strait later on today and tonight. Well, exactly how cold will it get later next week? We showed these maps yesterday from the website called tropicaltidbits.com. This is actually using an upgraded version of the GFS called the parallel GFS model run. And what we're seeing here are the 2 meter near the surface temperature anomalies. So this is actually the current situation in terms of temperature anomalies across the nation. The blues here represent below normal, and this is indicative of that cold air mass now pouring into the mid-Atlantic region. We're rather neutral right here. We'll become below normal certainly later today, and by Saturday certainly be below normal in the east. Above normal conditions right now across the northwest, the western part of the plains here, and that's the way it looks right now. How will it look next Thursday? Let's jump ahead to late next Thursday. And here we go from the Tropical Tidbits website. This is again the temperature anomaly near the surface for Thursday night of next week using the upgraded version of the GFS model called the GFS Parallel. Just a widespread area here of below normal temperatures, basically the eastern 2/3 of the nation, and this is significantly below normal. When you see some purples on here, this particular legend, you're talking about 20 degrees below normal, 20 degrees Celsius below normal. Again, this is the latter part of next week, and again, we'll be monitoring the possibility of a storm forming in this region in the cold air towards the latter part of next week. So some major changes coming throughout much of the Pacific Ocean region and the continental U.S. over the next 7 to 10 days or so. It'll be an exciting time here, perhaps resulting in the first snow threat of the season in the Mid-Atlantic region. Certainly, much colder air moves in towards the middle and latter part of next week. Well, that's it for now. For VencoreWeather.com, I'm meteorologist Paul Dorian.